Well, good afternoon. This is a new podcast, and it is called The Endurance of Labor Laws. And just to give a proper introduction, my name is Lesley Sullivan. That is Lesley. And I spell that because a lot of people misspell my name and they put IE. And just so you know, if ever you write me a check, I cannot cash it or deposit it if it's not spelled correctly. So if ever you're paying me for a job well done or for a wonderful book I'm going to write, please spell my name correctly. It will make me smile and be very happy. So, as I stated before, my name is Lesley Sullivan, and I reside in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Oklahoma is in the middle of the United States. We are located in what is called Tornado Alley, and it is definitely not a dull place to live. I think Oklahoma, if I remember correctly, has the most tornadoes on the planet, and I can definitely see why. I remember being a little girl, and we had tornadoes all the time through the spring and summer, and for the most part, fall and winter were very dull in terms of tornado season. But here recently, we had a tornado touchdown in Oklahoma City. I think it was a couple weeks ago. And it was very startling because I heard the alarm go off at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I jumped out of bed because I immediately recognized what alarm it was, because they test the sirens every weekend, at least in Oklahoma City. They test it every weekend on Saturday at 12 noon. And I'm glad that they do that because it makes you familiar with what that noise is, and also you know whether or not it's working right. So it's good to test your systems like that. It is really good. But when I heard the siren a few weeks ago, I jumped out of bed because I knew what alarm it was. But then I hesitated for a moment because I was still kind of waking up, and I thought, is it spring already? Like, did I just sleep through fall and winter? Like, I was kind of questioning what day it was because I was still kind of in a stupor. And I thought, how funny is that I hear the alarm and I want to seek shelter, but I'm so confused by the alarm and the time of year that's going off, I'm not really sure what to do. It was just for a brief little second there that I hesitated, and I was like, you know what, I don't care what time of year it is, I need to seek shelter. And so while I'm looking up, where the tornado is, things like that, I just double-checked the time and date, and I was like, it's October, and we're having a tornado? And because the electricity went out, which sucked, I looked up the tornado watch on a news app on my phone. So I was very grateful to have that data for my phone so that I could look that up weather-wise. Because that's one of the things that is kind of scary with tornadoes is when you lose electricity and you don't know if the storm has just started or if you're in the middle of it or it's already passed, because the sky, it doesn't always show you exactly what's going on, because with tornadoes, you can have a thunderstorm before, during, or after a tornado. So if you lose electricity, then you don't have access to the news channels, which in Oklahoma, my favorite news channels for Oklahoma City are News Channel 4, 5, and 9. Those are my favorites. So I just Googled Oklahoma news weather on my phone and was able to pull up a news channel and look at their map and take a look at, okay, where did this thing touch down? And it was near me at the time. And I can see the direction that it's going, so I can kind of take a guess, a pretty good guess. Okay, how long is this going to last, and when is it going to move on to its next spot that it's going to hit? And then finally the electricity came back on and all those good, wonderful things. But that's just kind of how funky Oklahoma is. We have weird weather all throughout the year. So we have tornadoes predominantly in the spring and summer. Every once in a while we have a fluke, like we did a couple weeks ago, and have a tornado touchdown in the fall. In the fall and winter months, these can get crazy with other types of weather. We have a lot of flash floods, and because our topsoil is not rich, fertile soil like in the south, we have flash floods really bad because the soil gets picked up in the water and it just rushes down the street or the road. So what's sad is that if you're driving at night and you're not really paying attention to a flash flood warning, your car could slam right into a flash flood and you don't realize it till you're right on it. And some people will laugh or think, well, how could that be? Are you people stupid in Oklahoma? No, we're not stupid. This could actually happen to anybody. When you're driving at night, and not all of our roads are well lit, but when you're driving at night, when water mixes with the topsoil, it no longer glistens and it no longer looks like water. It's just really dark substance there, and just within a second, the road disappears in a flash flood. And so that's what can happen, and it can spring up anybody. It doesn't mean you're dumb or a moron. It can just happen. So in those situations, you got to be careful. And what happens a lot of the times is that when you're driving through an area, for the most part, there are signs that say, caution, this is a flash flood area, because they know which parts of Oklahoma dip down lower than the other parts of Oklahoma, I should say. And so water can really rush through some of those crevices really quick. And it can happen really fast. The other types of crazy weather that we have in the fall and winter is blizzards, ice, sleet, snow, and also black ice. Black ice is very dangerous. I think it's worse than a flash flood. That's just my personal opinion. But black ice is very similar in that when it snows or it's sleeting or ice is coming down from the sky, it's mixing with the soil on the road or the dirt that's been in the air, because we have a lot of wind here in Oklahoma. So soil is almost always in the air. Dirt is almost always in the air. We have a lot of wind here, so you can expect there to be pollen. You can expect there to be any kind of debris. I'm not saying like tractors are flying around all the time. That's not what I mean by debris. But we have a lot of wind here. Very high gust winds. Like it can be 40 miles an hour just out of nowhere while you're trying to drive to work. So you've got to be prepared on the highway. You're doing 60 miles an hour, and a gust of wind comes right at you at 40 miles an hour. You kind of have to be prepared for that. But when you grow up in this, you're kind of more accustomed to it. But black ice is whether the snow or the ice mixes with the topsoil, which again, we don't have a good topsoil. But what happens is when that freezes, the ice no longer is pretty like a wonderful winter wonderland. It's black or brown, and it doesn't glisten. So you'll be driving on the road, and you'll hit a patch of ice that you didn't know it was there, because, you thought you're on cement, but then you hit this patch of ice, and your vehicle just goes off into a ditch. I mean, it happens so quick, so fast. So whenever that stuff happens, whenever I know there's a chance of ice, especially on our bridges, because bridges freeze over very easily here in Oklahoma, I always drive below the speed limit, if not drive in second or first gear, so that way my tires are not spinning if I accidentally hit a patch of black ice, because you can tell when you hit it, because it feels like you literally are hydroplating just for a second, and it's scary, and you're trying to control the wheel of your car. And so that's kind of the dangerous part to that. But anyway, that's kind of a way of describing Oklahoma. That's probably not the most positive way to describe Oklahoma, but it is a nice place to live. It really is. We have our tough moments, but we also have our really good, wonderful moments in Oklahoma. And I've been told by people that come through here all the time, or people that visit here, that we are some of the nicest people that they have ever met, because, we actually talk to you, we smile, we're kind, we're warm, we're inviting. And I think that is a wonderful thing to hear, because sometimes I wonder if people actually like the central part of the United States, because for the most part, people view Oklahoma as just kind of a crazy hick state, and we're all walking around with our guns on our belts, almost like the wild, wild west. And I think that would actually be funny and fun at the same time if we did that. Like, I wish we still had saloons. I think it would be funny. I think it would be free entertainment. I just think it'd be funny. But anyway, that's just my personal opinion on that. But I love to meet people as well, especially from other countries, and hear what they think and what their first impression is of Oklahoma and things like that. And what's funny is that whenever I meet Europeans, they are a hoot, because they almost always think that we still live in teepees and that we still have problems with Indians and cowboys. And I just bust out laughing, because they're surprised that I'm not in a, what's it called, a skirt that's like a hula hoop skirt. I'm probably not pronouncing it right, but basically that I don't dress like Scarlett O'Hara. They're kind of surprised that we don't have horse and buggy times anymore like that, and if we do, it's in a parade. So, but one thing about Europeans is they love coming here to see our museums, and they love to see if we still have Indian reservations, which we do still have some, but it's not like what you're thinking of from a black and white movie. It's not the same as 1800s. If anything, Europeans are surprised that a lot of these Indian tribes now own most of the casinos in the state of Oklahoma, if not all of them. So, these Indian tribes, they are by no means poor. They make really good money off of casinos, and they are making bank. God bless them. They're making money. So it just really amazes me when people come and visit here. And the other thing that Europeans like to do, I actually met a guy that he was from Denmark, and he came to the United States specifically to rent a Camaro and drive it across the United States, but specifically on Route 66, because Route 66, I had no idea this was so popular with Europeans, but I guess over there they know about our Route 66. And European men love to rent Camaros or Corvettes or motorcycles when they land here in the United States, and they love to drive on that because it's just like the thing to do. And I just kind of looked at him, I was like, Route 66? You gotta be kidding me. Like, I grew up in a town where Route 66 goes right through it, and we didn't really think there was anything special about it. It's just part of our main street. It was just what it is. I grew up in Yukon, Oklahoma, and now I live in Oklahoma City, but when you grow up with something that it's not really a big to-do, it just kind of takes you aback for a moment when someone actually travels overseas to see this site that you've been living near your entire life. Just kind of takes you aback a little bit. But it's just really neat to hear what people think, when they come here and visit. I just think it's a wonderful thing. But anyway, my lovely podcast, again, is entitled The Endurance of Labor Laws, and I am super excited about this because I have always been a supporter of labor laws and protecting workers' rights and encouraging people to understand their rights in the United States and in the state that they live in. And I say that as a Republican. I am not a Democrat, I'm not independent, I'm actually a Republican, and that probably shocks a lot of people. And I say thank you, because there are so many people that think Republicans are evil and that all we care about is money, 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 and, we think the rich should just be able to do what they want to do, and I don't think that. I cannot think of any Republican that I know that thinks that way. Most Republicans are really good, kind people. The bad ones, to me, are the ones that just don't care about human life, and they just think that they can just do whatever they want, whenever they want, and their mentality is kind of this elitist mentality, and it's very similar to some very extreme liberal Democrats that I've met that are well off, and they think that they should just be able to make up any policies they want and shove it down everybody's throat. Well, it's very similar to some elitists in the Republican Party that want to do the same thing but do it their way. So it's kind of this control issue within each party, and it's only the select few that are the extreme and that are not normal and that don't really care about all human life. Like, for example, like, there may be people that I don't personally like, but based on my faith, I am required to love everybody. I believe in God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. I believe in the Jewish Messiah. I practice a faith that is kind of in between Christianity, kind of non-denominational Christianity, but also Messianic Judaism. That's more of what I practice. So I kind of practice more just the real Judeo-Christian faith. I'm kind of not particularly in one specific denomination anymore. I was raised one denomination when I was a child. I did not agree with it at all. I'm not going to say the name of it. And then I church hopped throughout college, and then I converted to another denomination, which I'm not going to say at this point, because I'm not here to shame and blame anyone. It's just my personal faith journey. And then as an adult, I have grown way more in my faith just based on me personally comprehending what I need to know to draw closer to God. Like, it's my personal journey, my personal faith walk with God. And that means more to me than anything else on this earth. Like, it means more to me than food, water, and shelter, gold, silver, or myrrh. Like, because that's how much I love God, because I know how much He loves me. So that's kind of how I roll with this. But also, based on what I believe in is how I treat other people. So I know that if I am valued, then everybody on the face of the earth is valued. So I don't think that anybody should be suppressed. I don't think anybody should be oppressed. And again, I'm saying that as a Republican. Because a lot of people think that Republicans are bad and we don't do enough, and we think that corporations do absolutely nothing wrong and they should be able to make all this money however they want. That is not true. If anything, I literally cannot stand it when corporations get bailouts from the federal government, because those are our tax dollars that are being given to corporations that have mismanaged their own money. It's not my fault they can't get their bleep together and start functioning correctly as a good, moral company. And it is possible to function as a good, moral company. You have to choose to behave that way, just like how you have to choose to be a bad company. So I bring this up because I've always had a fascination with labor laws, and the way that I first started kind of getting introduced to labor laws was when I started working as a teenager. And I would always read those posters that are required to be put up in any kind of work environment, and I would look at them and be like, oh, that's nice to know we have rights. And then I realized that once I started working, you really don't have very many rights. It's just really kind of dependent upon what your boss thinks that day, if they're in a bad mood or a good mood, and then trying to prove that they did something wrong is really difficult and hard. And it's even worse if it's a whistleblower situation, because you're really not protected as much as you think you are by the federal government. And I'm not for the federal government being super powerful, but I do think the federal government does have an obligation to protect citizens from bad employers, from bad work environments, and from misleading financial information. I do believe the federal government has a responsibility to help workers out on that. And I say that not just from a Republican point of view, but from a citizen point of view. Like, regardless of what party you're in the United States, if you're a citizen, you're a citizen. Like, you can be a citizen and not vote. You can be a citizen and not be a part of any particular group. You can be a citizen and own property. You can be a citizen and not own property. Like, your citizen rights are not dependent upon all these other factors. You're either a citizen or you're not. And to be a citizen of any country is an honor, and it's also, in a way, an obligation. That's how I look at. Like, I knew that when I turned 18, I couldn't wait to register to vote. I was so excited. It just meant so much to me to register to vote. Not many people in my class thought that way, and I thought they were lazy and stupid. I was like, how can you not be excited about being seen as a legal citizen of the United States? Like, that's your voice right there. Like, you do all this complaining, and I could use other words where I'm trying to clean up my language at age 37. I was like, you complain all the time about stuff, but then when it comes down to it, you don't do anything about it. And then some of them, when they do actually do something about it, they do it completely wrong. And I'm seeing that with some of these protests that are happening across the country. And it's just, violence is not the answer. If you have something to say, is it better to get in someone's face and hit their face? Or is it better to come together in a peaceful way? You can have a peaceful argument. I think a lot of people have forgotten that just because you disagree, that doesn't mean you have to hate. Hate needs to stop at the door. Whatever I think about something or whatever I hate, it should not be a part of that conversation. It should be about logic. It should be about the facts. It should be about, hey, what are you passionate about? But it should never flow over into just these wild, crazy emotions that are not civil. It's just discontentment at an extreme level on a Richter scale that should have never happened in our country, much less in our society. And I bring that up because it seems like so many things are hitting the fan and so many people are forgetting the basics. So I thought that I would help out with things because I have had a lot of experience in work. I've had jobs, I've lost jobs, I've quit jobs, and I've researched a lot of different laws. Now, first of all, I'm going to say I am not a lawyer. I am not a judge. I am probably, on the surface, I'm probably not the most educated person that you will ever meet. However, that doesn't mean that my voice is less important than someone that has a PhD. And I'll just tell you, I do have a degree, but it's a bachelor's degree in general studies with emphasis in English and history. So, that being said, if you were to try and find somebody that had the most knowledge on labor laws, I would probably be one of the last people that you would consult on the surface. But below the surface is where you really need to find your information, because I look at it this way, experts don't know everything. They have a general idea, and they really like to toot their horn on stuff, but it's been my experience that experts, they don't have a lot of workplace experience. They don't have a lot of experience in whatever they have actually studied because they have the bookworm smarts, but they don't actually have the experience in that field just yet. And when it comes to labor laws, this is very evident. Very, very, very evident because our labor laws are not where they need to be to protect the worker. And I'll give an example here. Like when I was younger and I first started working, I was all for the employer because, I hear all these employees complaining about stuff, and there were some bad employees, but I was like, you really need to give the employer a chance. I was always siding with the employer. And then as I got older, which very quickly into my early 20s, I was like, the employer is not really looking so good right now because you start learning more about wages, you start learning more about taxes. At least I did. And to me, that's a young age to start learning about, but that's great. Continue to grow in your field, whatever that case may be. And I started really realizing that our work environments are not as safe as they should be. And there's a reason why sometimes OSHA comes in and investigates things. And there's a reason why sometimes the federal government cracks down on employers because either something got reported or they're saying, hey, you're not following the right regulations here, or you're not even doing what you're supposed to be doing. And you learn that as you experience these things and you get older and you get wiser. So I look at it this way, anything I can do to help other people have a better work environment, and also we can work together to have better labor laws that actually help the worker, to me that's a blessing. That is such a blessing because I can't tell you how many times I've prayed for better labor laws, for better work environments, for higher wages, for no discrimination whatsoever. And I've experienced discrimination, and I am 37 years old, white, and single. And I have experienced discrimination. Discrimination does not know how to word this. Discrimination isn't just against blacks or against Mexicans or against immigrants. It's not always that specific. Discrimination can happen anywhere, anytime, any place, and it's not always against the poor. It is not. It can occur anywhere, anytime. It's almost like domestic violence. Domestic violence is not just in one group of people. It can be anywhere at any time because you're dealing with people. That's it. Different people from different walks of life can have the same problem. It's not isolated, is my point. Can you have a higher rate in certain demographics? Yes, but that doesn't mean it's isolated. So that's one reason why a lot of things should come to the forefront, because if it's not isolated, that is a even bigger problem than we want to realize. Because if it's not isolated, then that means we have a bigger responsibility to help nip that problem in the bud. Big time. That's how I view it. But anyway, I digress on that. But I thought, to start this out, I thought I would go to the Oklahoma.gov website and, just look at some of the questions that the supposedly frequently asked. And this is the Oklahoma Department of Labor website. So it's ok.gov. And some of these things I just busted out laughing because I thought either A, this isn't written right, or B, they just don't really care about the worker as much as I thought they should. It says here, so there's a question here. Question number 2 says, are breaks and lunch periods mandatory? The answer says, neither federal nor state law require employers to provide breaks to employees aged 16 or older. Mandatory break laws only apply to children under the age of 16. Breaks and lunch periods are considered benefits and remain at the discretion of the employer. All I can say is I busted out laughing at that because, what does it say about our laws when they don't think lunch breaks should be required or any kind of break should be required for adults? So if you're 16 and older, they basically are saying your employer can do whatever they want with you. And that's the problem. The employer does not own you. They do not determine when you eat and when you go to the bathroom. Because that happened to me when I worked in retail. This was several years ago. So this for sure was not recent, but this was several years ago. And I got into tiffs all the time with management about this. Because it was like you couldn't ever go to the bathroom. And it's like, I really need to go. And women can actually get urinary tract infections. They can get a lot of infections if they don't go to the bathroom. And it's just like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, I'm not saying I would need to go, like, all the time, but I maybe went twice on a shift because I was always holding it. And it's like, then it made me not want to drink water because I knew it would make my boss mad, my manager angry, if I went to the bathroom. Because I'd have to leave the sales floor to go to the bathroom. And eventually, I just said, you know what, I'm so sick and tired of having to tiptoe around doing something that is basic human function. I need to go to the bathroom. I mean, if the customers get to go to the bathroom, why can't we? We're the ones that are standing on our feet 10 to 12 hours a day, in heels, mind you. This was back when it was still seen as part of a woman's uniform. The only way that she could be taken seriously is if she wore pantyhose and heels. And that greatly irritated me because I thought, I have a brain. I don't have to wear stilettos to be taken seriously. Just like a guy doesn't have to wear cowboy boots to be taken seriously on a ranch. It's just such discrimination towards women. It was so bad. Because it was like the guys could kind of do whatever they want, but women, oh no, you've got to put the real stronghold on them. And I just thought, you've got to be kidding me. So the people that I worked with, we just kind of worked out a way that we could each go to the bathroom at certain times, and we would cover for each other on the floor to make sure that our station was manned and we're helping customers and things like that, to try and avoid punishment basically from management. Then management would not always want us to go to lunch, and it was always a battle trying to figure out when we could go to lunch, because lunch is typically, when people think about lunchtime, they think 12 noon. So we would try and schedule our lunches between, like, someone would go at 11 or 11:30, 12 or 12:30 or 1. Well, our employer, this retailer, which was notorious for doing stuff like this, like, you would be working like 9 to 5 or 9 to 7 or 9 to 9, and they would schedule your lunch at like 2 or 3. So by the time you get to lunch, you're starving and you don't feel very good. And we actually had people passing out on the floor because they weren't getting their breaks, they weren't able to go to the bathroom, and then they weren't going to lunch at the appropriate time. So this employer didn't even care that their employees were fainting on the shift, on the floor and in front of customers. And, they would just go, oh, they just got low blood sugar. Well, here's a news flash. Anybody on the face of the earth can have low blood sugar if you're starving them, if you're not giving them access to food and water that they're supposed to go get. Even if the employee is paying for their own food, let them go get their own food. Another problem with this employer was they wanted you to eat in the break room, and only the break room. I was like, I'm not going to eat in that hovel. It's a hellhole. It was dark. It was miserable. People were crouched over. It's like the moment you entered that break room, it's like everybody turned into a hunchback because they just have their face right above their plate. They're eating fast and then get back out on the sales floor. It's like work, work, work. that was not appropriate at all. So I was one of the few people that I always took my entire hour lunch break, and I would walk down to the food court, and I would get my food, and I would not walk back to the break room. I was going to be a human being and eat in the food court just like anybody else. And if anything, I got to talk to customers in the food court. Like, people actually got to see me, they got to see my name tag, they got to talk to me about the brand, and, because brand ambassador was not really a title that was used back then. Our name tags only had the words sales associate on there. Unless you had been there a long time and made them a lot of money, then you were, I forget the name they called it. But there was a difference between just being a underling and someone that had been there a long time. But, I looked at it as, if I go in the food court and I'm in my uniform, I'm wearing my name tag, my badge, with the name of the employer on it, with my name, then technically I'm a brand ambassador for that store. So, if anything, I get to still promote the store while I'm walking about the mall and just looking at things. Sometimes I would just go window shopping on my break, but also I get to go eat lunch or dinner, or whatever the case may be, and plus I got to know other employees in the mall. And because of that, I actually increased my sales, because employees from other stores would come in and look for me and say, hey, Lesley, can you help me find, XYZ? I said, sure, I'll help you with that. But our employer didn't view it that way. They wanted so much control over where we stood, where we went, what we did. It was like a daycare for adults, but we were treated like we had no brain at all. It was very unpleasant. So whenever I see things like this on a state's labor website about mandatory breaks and things like that, it's just kind of shocking that they say things like that. Because I thought that stuff was mandatory, because I know that now things are more mandatory, they are more mandatory in a general sense, because now it looks bad if someone doesn't get a lunch break. And I think one of the good things about COVID-19 is that it really changed how retailers treat their employees, because way back in the day when I was working in retail, even if you were sick, you had to show up to work. Even though you risked getting everybody else sick, you had to show up to work. And what I couldn't stand was working with someone that was sick, because I knew I was going to get sick. So I always tried to stay away from the sick employee, and I would call management out on that and say, hey, they need to go home and rest, because they're actually going to be sicker longer by being on their feet 10 to 12 hours a day, possibly with a fever, than if they would just go home and rest a couple days, if not 3 or 4 days, and then get right back into working after that time period. But because this employer was obsessed with quota and money and profit, we suffered a lot in terms of sickness. We suffered a lot in terms of kind of a aggressive sales environment. But that came down from management. And it made it very difficult for sure. And so I guess I'll go ahead and read the next one. So number 3 is, what is the current minimum wage? It says here, the federal and state minimum wage of $7.25 per hour has been in effect since July 24th of 2009. Now, I don't know how up to date that is, because I've seen people that have said that their minimum wage, and they may just mean they personally are paying this, their minimum wage is $15 an hour. And I think that was at McDonald's. So I'll have to look that up. But I just think it's sad that the minimum wage back in 2009 for sure was $7.25 per hour. That is almost poverty. And here's the thing. If gas is $3 a gallon, you could maybe get a little over 2 gallons of gas with 1 hour of labor. So how are you supposed to get to and from work? Right there, that's a big problem. Minimum wage should be way higher than $7.25. I know employers don't like that, but people need to have a minimum wage. Like, that goes into workers' rights right there. They need a good minimum wage. And sometimes when they greatly increase the minimum wage way too fast, way too quickly, it causes inflation. However, it says right here this minimum wage has been $7.25 an hour since 2009. They couldn't have raised it $1 each year that would have been slow progression towards a better minimum wage. That way it's not jumping from $7.25 an hour to $15 an hour. Because when you are jumping that big of amount in terms of minimum wage, yeah, that is going to put a strain on an employer. That I can understand. Because it's two totally different income brackets. And it would apply to a lot of the workforce that has been working minimum wage for a long time. But if the minimum wage had gone up steadily over time to keep up with inflation and interest rates, it would not be that big of a deal. But our state and federal government did not do its due diligence in keeping up with things like this. Just basic things that people need in life is just basic wages that can help sustain them. Like, I can't imagine living off of that and having a car payment, paying your rent, paying for your health insurance, paying for your medicines, paying for fuel. I mean, just basic necessities would be very difficult. Like, I don't know how anyone could pay an electric bill here in Oklahoma, considering how hot and cold it gets in the summer and the winter. Like, those are the worst months in Oklahoma when the electric bills and the gas bills get really high. And that's why some people can't afford to pay their electricity bills. They can't afford to pay their utilities. It's because of things like this. If the wage is so low, but the utility rates are so high, this is why we have a lot of people that get their utilities shut off. And to me, it's not completely their fault. Like, if their wages are continuously staying low and it's not keeping up with the market, whose fault is that? It's not the employee's fault. It's the employer's fault, and also the federal government for not keeping up, for not doing its job of staying, that's the right word, of staying competent with this. You know, what I would do, and this is what I did, because at one point I was making minimum wage, and so I didn't want to stay at minimum wage. So I went ahead and applied to jobs that made way more money, and so I started learning new skill sets and doing new things with my life to make more money. That's one thing you can do as a worker, and I wish all of them would do that, because I'm not against people starting out somewhere. I'm not against minimum wage. It's just that amount, to me, is pathetic, because I know how much things cost in Oklahoma. Like, oil and gas goes up and down in Oklahoma, because Oklahoma is very oil and gas driven. So when there's a problem with oil and gas, we very much feel it. And it's really bad. We really suffer here. And the people that suffer the most are the middle class and the lower income. And, you know, the upper crust, you know, the super wealthy, they feel it too, but it's not as bad. And I'm not against wealthy people. We need wealthy people. If anything, I wish everybody was wealthy. I wish everybody was a millionaire and or a billionaire. Because then, you know, we wouldn't have to deal with minimum wage. We would just all be super rich, doing what we love, you know, inventing new things, having our own companies, making good money, and, you know, doing really good things in this earth and being a blessing to other people. However, it's usually the middle class and lower income brackets that suffer the most whenever we have problems with oil and gas prices. It is a big problem. I will definitely say that. I'll go ahead and do another one here, because I don't want to go well over 40 minutes or anything, but because I want to try and keep these short, sweet, and quaint so as to not overload anybody's mind with this. So number 4 says, are all employers required to pay minimum wage? The answer is no. Unless otherwise covered by federal wage and hour laws, an Oklahoma employer must comply with state minimum wage laws if the company has at least 10 full-time employees or equivalent and or grosses more than $100,000 annually. The first thing I thought of was people that work as waiters and waitresses. I totally disagree that their wages are so low, because I think the wage used to be $2.15 an hour or $2.35 an hour. I'll have to double check that. And if ever I'm wrong on something or I need to fact check something, I will update that in the next podcast for sure. So I think that's really sad that employers are not required to pay minimum wage. I think all of them should be required to pay minimum wage. Because minimum wage, it's the minimum. Like, why would you go below the minimum? To me, that's just sickening. Like, I cannot imagine owning a company and knowing full well that some of my employees are not even making the minimum wage. That would really bother me. I would feel like I'm going to hell if I did that. Because I think about, what do I need to survive? Because what I need to survive is probably very similar or just the same as what somebody else needs to survive. And if I know what I need, I know what they need. So I think that whatever is good enough for me is good enough for somebody else. That's just how I view it. I just think, it just bugs me with stuff like this. But, it's good to be aware of what laws are in your state and in your country and also in your county. Because this also goes into, what should you be making? And I guess I'll close with this. The way that I look for jobs and the way that I negotiate what I want to make, I just tell the employer straight up what I want to make and what my wages are. Like, what do I work for? I don't leave any guesswork. So what I do before the interview is I look up what is the national average, because even though I am in Oklahoma, that doesn't mean I should make less or more just because I live in Oklahoma. Like, for example, I can be working the exact same job in California, but I'll be making more money, way more money, but the standard of living is very high in California because of really high taxes, which I totally disagree with high taxes. I think taxes should be super low for everybody. It doesn't matter if you're rich, middle class, or poor. All taxes should be low. Because when your taxes are low, you actually have more money flowing through your economy. Because once the government takes taxes out of your wages and out of a product that you paid sales tax on, that money does not get back. It doesn't get put back into the economy. It affects the currency rates. So what I would do in terms of looking for a job and trying to get a really good wage, what I do is I look up the national average. And then I make that what I want, or I increase it personally for me. So say, for example, the job that I want, the national average is $40,000 a year. Well, I'm going to ask for $45 to $50K a year because I want some leg room to negotiate with the employer. And here's how I word it in an interview. Let's say they're asking their questions, and I wait till they ask me, do you have any questions? And I say, yes, when are you needing someone to start? And they usually tell you, we need it by this time, or we're just thinking about it, or we're just wrapping up interviews. They usually give some kind of BS answer. And I might ask, okay, why is the position available? And then my third question is, what is the pay scale for this position? That's my way of saying this is about money, and I want to be paid appropriately for the job because I know I have the skill sets, I know I have the talent, I know I can do the job, and this is what I'm going to work. So, but you do want to be blunt about it, but you want to be kindly blunt. And the word blunt tends to have a negative connotation with it. There is nothing wrong with just saying it like it is, because when you're dealing with money and your wages, you need to say it like it is. And if someone doesn't like you being straightforward, that's a big red flag that they're not going to be straightforward with you about your wages, your vacation pay, your sick leave, your health insurance. That has been my experience. If they're not straightforward with you, that's a big red flag not to work for them. So again, what I say is, what is the pay scale for this position? Because that gives the employer an opportunity to answer in a calm, casual way. You're putting them on the spot, but not in a bad way, because it's an interview. You're technically interviewing each other. And it gives them a chance to say, well, we're going to pay from, our pay scale is this range to this number to this number. And then they ask you, what wages are you looking for? And so what I do before the interview is I calculate what is the gross income I'm looking for, and what is that per hour? Because one time an employer stumped me. I gave the gross income, and they said, well, what do you want hourly? I'm like these people don't know. It was really kind of weird. So I learned from that mistake to know specifically what does $45K a year equal hourly. like that specific, and then know it in increments. Like if I want to make $45K to $50K a year, then I want to know immediately in my head or have it written down if I'm doing a phone interview or a Zoom interview, which that's being done a lot now. And even via email. I've been doing interviews via email because it's kind of like a pre-screening. I put my range. What is my per hour pay rate range? What is my gross income range that I'm willing to accept? Let's say, for example, I don't have a job at all. I'm desperate. Do not ever come across as desperate because you're totally shooting yourself in the foot with that. Because it shows lack of confidence. And if you have lack of confidence in an interview, they're going to be able to walk all over you once you get there to work. Because if you don't have confidence in an interview, like you may have been able to make $45K a year, but because you lacked confidence, now they're only going to pay you $32K a year. I mean, that's a drop of $13,000 in income that could have been in your pocket as your wages. So don't ever underestimate your value, your self-worth, because you are worth every penny and then some. Because I look at it this way. I may be requesting $45K to $50K, but I know that if I work overtime, I get time and a half. So then my wages automatically go up to $55 to $65K a year based on how many hours of overtime I work. That's the great thing about overtime. Great thing. Because then you can really make bank off of your wages there. And plus, I love working overtime because I love to work. I love being a part of a good company. I love giving my best to my employer. And I like being a part of society. I really do. And also, this may sound weird, but I love paying taxes. I think taxes are a great responsibility for every citizen in any country, but especially the United States. I say that because, number one, I'm American. Number two, I think it's a great responsibility and an honor to pay back to your country what it needs to survive and thrive. And that means helping with your infrastructure. That means helping people on different welfare programs that maybe need help getting back to work. Because I don't believe in just staying on welfare for your entire life unless there's an extreme circumstance. Most people can work until they're age 65 unless they want to retire early, which that's great if you can financially do that. But I think that we should all be paying back to the government what we should in taxes so that we have a safe, stable country. To me, that's paying your dues. I look at it this way. It's almost like being a part of a lodge or a union. You pay your dues. To keep things flowing, to keep things moving, to do good things in your country. There are certain things that we have to pay our bills for. So whenever I'm paying my taxes, to me, it's an honor to do so because I know I'm paying for the safety of my country. I'm paying for the military. I'm paying veterans' wages. I love that. I'm paying for their benefits. So if they served our country, whether or not they got hurt, I know they have benefits. I know they have health insurance of some sort via the government. I don't agree with everything that has happened with the veterans in terms of how the federal government handled or mishandled some things. But it's important to really think about the positives when you're paying your taxes because I think it's very easy to get very negative. So I always go with I pay my taxes because I'm a good citizen and something that I enjoy, and I like seeing good things happen in my society, in my country, and in my community, and that's where my taxes are being used. I do not automatically assume that they're being misappropriated or they're being mishandled or they're being used in a bad way. I don't automatically assume that. To me, you have to prove it to me that that's happening because I want to see the facts, just like I want to see the facts that things are going well, that monies are being handled correctly, like when there's an audit of the federal budget, things like that. That doesn't mean necessarily that something bad is happening. You should be having an audit of your budget. You should have an internal audit and an external audit. That's just normal business practice. I think that should be across the board normal business practice so you know what's going on. But those are just some of the things that I think about whenever I think about labor laws, whether they're state, local, or federal, because whether they're state, local, or federal, they impact every single person, whether you're working or not. Because if an employer messes up an employee's wages or they do something really bad, it affects that entire community and possibly that entire state. So just because I don't work for somebody, just because I don't work for a bad company, that doesn't mean that I shouldn't care. Now, that doesn't mean I should join a picket line and cause a problem or a nuisance. It just means that, hey, I should care about those people. I should care that employers are doing wrong or they're doing good. It is my social responsibility to be responsible. That's how I view it. And that's how I viewed it for a long time. And it has, it has ruffled some feathers over the years. But most of the time, when that ruffles feathers, it tells me that some people think that workers should just be treated however an employer wants. And that's not right. You know, a lot of employers, I think they forget that at one point they started out at the bottom. They started out with an entry position. And just because somebody's starting out in an entry position, that doesn't mean that they should be treated lesser as a worker. That's probably one of the biggest things that I see that just irritates me, is when someone's just starting out in life, but they're viewed as almost subhuman in the workforce. Because I know I was treated that way, and I see people being treated that way, and it just doesn't sit well with me. It never has, it never will. But I will say this, in terms of trying to make change, we need to do it in a kind and professional manner. I don't believe in picket lines. I don't believe in riots. I don't believe in violence. I think you have proper progress when you have peace in your heart. Like, I can be irritated or upset about something, but I always try to approach it in a peaceful manner. Because you're not going to convert people to your idea if you're just spewing hate or being extremely unprofessional and unrealistic. I would rather hear what the other person has to say, take into account what they're saying, and come to a happy agreement. You know, meet people in the middle. I look at it this way. I have two rules that every decision I make has to satisfy. Everything I do has to be legal and moral. Because just because it's legal doesn't mean it's moral. But I've learned that, and I've had this rule ever since I was a teenager. Like, I just made it up in my mind as a teenager because I went to work at age 16. And I quickly learned that you have got to watch your back, and you've got to be careful what you say, do, think, and feel when you're working for somebody else. And, you know, I did see some unethical things, and I just thought, you know, that's a mental note of what not to do. So I made it a mental, firm decision that everything I do has to be legal and moral. Like, I don't operate in the gray area. I view everything as black and white, yes and no, and the reason I do that is because it keeps it simple, it keeps it precise, and it eliminates a lot of problems. Because in the gray area is where a lot of things happen and where it gets really messed up, because there aren't any definitives. And in order to get to a solution, you need to know exactly what the goal is, where you want to go, why you want to get there, and how you're going to get there. None of those things are going to come to pass if you're living in the gray area, because in the gray is where things are murky. I don't like murky waters. I like things to be crystal clear. I like things to be appropriate, good, and on the up and up. And that's how I live my life. But anyway, that is the beginning of this wonderful new podcast. This is episode 1. Do shoot me an email if you would like. My email is Lesley2018Sullivan@gmail.com, and that is Lesley 2018 Sullivan SULLIVAN@gmail.com. That is my personal email. Perhaps as time goes by, I will update it, with a different email. But until then, I pray that you're happy, healthy, and whole, that you love your job and you're making wonderful, wonderful wages, and that you're enjoying your life every day. Until next time, God bless you and love you all.